All right, guys. So here we are into vehicle maintenance done by mileage and date. I try not to make this one too long, but if you go back and print off the vehicle maintenance done by mileage and date, you can follow along and highlight the things that I talk about. Okay, so here we are, gasoline engines. We'll talk about gasoline engines first, then we'll talk about diesel engines there at the end. But what we want to do every 3,000 miles is we want to change the oil filter. I'm sorry, change the oil and filter. Um, Even though some oils boast of longer in between mileage, like 5,000 miles, we just really ought to stick to 3. That's what all ASE master technicians say to do. So when we're doing that, we want to check and fill or adjust or potentially clean the following items. Check our antifreeze. We want to make sure that we got enough of it in there. We want to make sure, especially in the winter, that it's adequate to freezing temperatures. We'd like to check our power steering fluid. Now, I will tell you, like on my vehicle, it doesn't have power steering fluid because my vehicle has electronic steering. So you'll want to look in your owner's manual for that. Also check your transmission fluid, automatic or manual transmission. Check our brake fluid, our washer fluid. Check and clean your battery terminals, and you may even need to replace a terminal end if it's not staying tight there on the battery. So we also want to lube the chassis. In the next slide, we'll talk about what is a serviceable chassis part versus what is not. Okay, let me get out my little laser pointer here. Okay, so serviceable chassis part versus non-serviceable chassis part. These two guys here are exactly the same. If you don't know what they are tie rod ends. And what makes them different, this is the serviceable one, this is the non-serviceable one. And what makes that different is this guy right here compared to this guy. There isn't one over here. So this little guy here is called a grease zerk, and it allows us to hook up a grease gun to it. In these black boots here and here, you have grease, and in a serviceable one, you can pump in new grease. The old stuff will be squished out. And in the non-serviceable, which more vehicles today are going this way. So that's what those would be. All right, so here we're just looking at a picture. It's that same serviceable chassis, that tie rod end. This over here, pretty much the same. It's a tie rod end, a little bit longer than this guy over here, but this is a grease gun. Here's our hose. This fella right here fits on this fella right here, and you squeeze the trigger and pump grease up into that bad boy. All right, so on this slide, this is just another picture of grease zerks. You can't see the one, it would be right underneath here, but just another idea of what you'd look for. This is tie rod end here. This is a ball joint. This looks like this could be a pitman arm, or this is a tie rod. So now this might be a sway bar here. But anyway, that just give you a look at another one. We'll look at a drawing. Okay, so in this drawing, we'll be able to point out this is just basically common places that I'd have you look after you've raised your vehicle up and you're going to change the oil. This is just good places to look. Here on the top, you've got your upper ball joints, one over here, and down at the bottom. These are the easiest to usually see. lower ball joint, lower ball joint, and then all of these people, these are all the steering linkage. You got an outer tie rod, inner tie rod. Here's your center link, inner tie rod, outer tie rod, um, and then you've got that connection up here and here. There's could be some others, but mostly this is what we'd be looking at. So, all right. So, moving on in our gasoline engine, other things we want to check. We want to check and adjust our tire pressure. You should be able to find that right on the tire. Want to check our air filter. Now, I'll just tell you, I don't change my air filter every oil change. I look at it every oil change, but typically every other. If you drive in the country, this could be sooner because you get more dust and whatnot up in the engine compartment. But if you drive in town mainly, you shouldn't need to change it every single oil change. If you have a manual transmission, you'll want to check your clutch fluid. If you have a four-wheel drive, you'd have a transfer case. A rear-wheel drive vehicle would have a rear differential. You want to check that. If you have a four-wheel drive, you'd have a rear differential and a front differential. And then you'd also want to check to make sure that all of your lights work. Make sure your high and low beams aren't burned out, turn signals work, and just check them all. All right. So here on this slide, we see, now I looked up 6 other vehicles from the owner's manuals just so we could get an idea of the different mileage for tire rotations. You know, ours in the 2005 Chevy Malibu is 5,000 to 8,000 miles. So you can see here that's pretty relative to other vehicles. Typically, time frame that most ASE technicians use is every other oil change. So if you change your oil at 3,000, you then change it again at 6, and you'd rotate your tires at that point. What we're going to use for our purposes is that 5,000 to 8,000 mile range. That's what we're looking for. So just remember that. All right, so here we've got, this is just the 4 basic common tire rotations. These first 2 on the left-hand side here where it says all vehicles. These are alternative tire rotations. Let's say, for example, you have a brand new vehicle. You bought it with 10 miles on it off the showroom floor, and it comes time for tire rotation, and there is no noticeable excessive wear. All the tires look like they've been going the same. You could use the X pattern here. You could use this front to back pattern here. If you had a vehicle that was not all-wheel drive, that had directional tires, and directional tires are only supposed to rotate in one direction, you would need to do this tire rotation here, because if this tire is supposed to go this direction, you can't switch it and put it over here on the back, because the tread would be going in the wrong direction. So these other 2 over here, front wheel drive vehicles and all wheel drive vehicles, would use the front wheel front to back. So your back tires are going to cross to the front, and your front tires go straight back. And rear-wheel drive vehicles and four-wheel drive vehicles, exactly the opposite. Your rear tires are going to come straight forward, and then you cross the front to the backside. So this slide here is really just to, you know, just kind of point out, live in the Flint Hills. There's quite a few dualies out there, but you can see here in this first section that you got a dual rear wheel vehicle, and you've got irregular tire wear on the back, but not the front. You could rotate them this way. If you've got irregular tire wear outside here, you just go front to back like that. And then this would be normal. Okay, so your insides come up to the outside's back, outside comes in. Another one that can be done is just swapping the rear side to side, and the same with the front. Okay, so moving on, we're almost done with the gas engine, but approximately at 30,000 miles, you'd want to check your fuel filter. I would say that a lot of vehicles today don't have a serviceable fuel filter, so check your owner's manual on that. If you have an older vehicle, saying right here, older, built before 96, or it doesn't have platinum plugs, you would want to change your spark plugs every 30,000 miles. At 50,000, this is where we'd be looking at changing our automatic transmission fluid and filter if the vehicle has a serviceable filter. If not, you're not going to touch it. CVT transmissions, you'd be looking at every 35,000 miles. Again, owner's manual is going to tell you whether or not that vehicle has an option. This one really rarely ever happens, in my opinion. If you think back to engine fundamentals, timing belts don't last as long as timing chains, but I don't know very many people who actually follow the guideline of having their timing belt replaced. So most people are just going to wait until it causes damage and then deal with it then. So, and then here we have 100,000 miles on a gas engine. This one is important. A couple of you got this wrong on the spark plugs. If it was built after 96, it probably has platinum plugs or higher quality. So you go 100,000 miles on those plugs. O2 sensors, the adjust transmission bands. That would be something I would defer to a transmission shop on whether or not that gets done. So, yeah, there we are. All right, so this will be the last slide on gas engines, but this is actually for all engines. Every couple years, you'd want to look at draining and replace the coolant. You also, if it is equipped with ABS, anti-lock braking system, you'd like to flush that brake fluid and get new brake fluid in there. So that'd be, you know, basically every couple years or so. So, all right, so now we're going to move on to a diesel engine. All right, so with a diesel engine, we go a little bit longer. They're all synthetic oil, and they go 5,000 miles on the oil and filter. Now, here's where a diesel engine is a little bit different than a gas engine. We'll use a 1999 Ford F-250 with a Power Stroke diesel engine as our example. I believe that's 7.3 liters. So this engine takes 3.75 gallons of 15W oil. Now, 3.75 gallons. That sounds like a lot. How many quarts do you think that is? Well, we can do the math. 4 quarts to a gallon. We just multiply that 3.75 times 4. That gives us 15 quarts. Now, you take the same vehicle, but with the largest gasoline engine, which would be a V10, 10-cylinder engine. And it only takes 6 quarts. That's more than half. So a diesel engine is going to use a whole lot more oil, but you can use it for a little bit longer. All right, I took this one right off of here. This is using that 99 Ford F-250. You'll see up here on the top, that is the 6.8 liter gas engine, 6 quarts. And then the bottom example, that is the 7.3 liter diesel engine. And there you've got 15 quarts. So just so you know the difference there. Other things are very similar. You would still want to check, fill, adjust, clean if necessary, your coolant, your antifreeze, power steering fluid, transmission fluid, whether it's automatic or manual, brake fluid, washer fluid, lube the chassis, go back, the same thing. You're more likely to find serviceable chassis parts on a pickup than you would on say an Explorer like my vehicle. All right, and then obviously the battery. One of the different things on this, we'll just run through this one real quick. Tire pressure, air filter, clutch, transfer case, and differential, just like before, but here's where it gets a little bit different, because if you remember back to the gas engine, it said to check that fuel filter every 30,000 miles. With a diesel engine, you need to change the fuel filter every 10,000, or every other oil change. It gets a little expensive to change the oil on a diesel engine all the time. So, and then you're rotating the tires. You want to, a lot of diesel owners will rotate every oil change. So it really just kind of depends on the person and the amount of wear that you put on a vehicle. So, wow, time to stop. All right, guys, check this out. Watch it again. I'll have more information put up later on. Have a great day.